Well, hello, beautiful ones. It's Stacy here, the head vixen of the Vixen Academy. And I have this real funny lesson and tale for you today. And it's all about how my dad is matchmaking from the other side. And it's very appropriate, I guess, that I share this story because this is going on the 1 year anniversary of my father's passing. For those of you that are new to me or new to my community, you can go to my website, thevixenacademy.com, to learn more about my sassy work and what I do in feminine leadership training, the sassy and provocative way. And then you can also go back to my blogs and maybe hear the first part around my dad's transition and my dad's passing. So when I shared with everyone some of the crazy antics that happened at my dad's funeral a year ago, since I was like so much in the shock and awe of what happened at his funeral, I wasn't in the mind space to actually share with you some hilarious things that happened at my dad's funeral. And this is one of those funny tales because it's literally what I call a hilarious lesson in love and how spirit definitely has a sense of humor. And when you're open to how source wants to deliver to you the things that you desire, it can definitely be a funny ride. All right. And so I want you to, take out paper and pen to jot down any ahas, any thoughts that you get from this. And I am going to give you at the very end at least a couple of things for contemplation that I would like for you to contemplate about so that you can take the lesson from this story to heart and apply it into your own life. All right. So let me kind of set it up about some stuff about my dad that you may or may not know. So one of the things about my dad is he was definitely a Casanova. All right. Pops was a Casanova. Always had a woman, always had a woman. And sometimes he had two women at the same time. Oh, yes. And it wasn't anything that was a secret. Okay. So, like, for example, when my dad was married to my mom, he had some chick on the side. Uh, my mom, kicked my dad to the curb. So his next wife, who I really liked, I really liked her. I would hang around with her. But then you know what? I was also hanging out with my dad's mistress and her children. And yes, I was like a teenager. I was when all this was going on, maybe middle school, teenage, whatever, And so, yes, that's kind of the family that I grew up in. Okay. Okay. And so I knew, hanging out with my dad's wife and then, mistress's kids and all this other stuff. So yeah, that's how my pops was. He always had a woman. Okay. So what happened is when at my dad's funeral, there was no drama from any kind of mistresses, thank goodness. Okay. that was definitely not going on. But what happened was my stepmom is the one woman that my dad did not step out on. She was the one woman that he was faithful to. And I love her very much. And so did he. And that was, I would say growing up, my dad was not the perfect example or a good example of, hey, how to be in relationships, and stuff like that. But in his silver years. I used to call him Silver Fox because his hair was bone white, stark white. So I called him the Silver Fox. Um, he loved her very much. And I could see that. I could feel that. And I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And when I spoke to my dad after he made his transition, and I spoke to him about, making amends for not being a father when he was alive. And he said that to trust him, that he won't let me down now that he's on the other side. Little did I know it was going to show up like this. So at my dad's funeral, um, the priest that married, and this is Episcopal, right? Not Catholic, but the priest that married my dad, he actually came down to Florida to do the eulogy. And I'm going to call him Father P. You'll find out in a moment as to why. So he came down. So there were two priests that were doing the funeral stuff for my dad. So Father P, though, was a friend of the family. So, okay, does a beautiful eulogy. I, get to know him. I even talked to him one-on-one. He said he'll share certain things with me, when I get back to California, that my dad shared with him, that he would like me to know since now that he's moved on, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, great. And so after the service, and we were all at the house afterwards, a lot of people, afterwards and getting together. All of a sudden, Father P, there was a smaller group of us, maybe 6 or 8. And Father P says this to me. He turns to me, he goes, "You're going to be my brother's future wife." And I looked at him, I was like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "You're going to be my brother's future wife. He has radical thinking just like you." And I was like, I don't quite know how to take the radical thinking part, but and he goes, "You live in California, don't you?" And I was like, "Yes." He goes, "So does he. He lives in California too." And I was like, "Okay." So he mentioned that to me at the table in front of all these people. So I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, he's humoring me. So, all right." But then the next day, he wouldn't let it go. Father P just kept going on with it. And I was just like, what is up with this? And trying to matchmake me with his brother. And then he goes, "Oh, and money's no object. He's set." And I'm like, okay. And so the day before, no, the day he was leaving, right? The day Father P was leaving, and stepmom was there, and 3 other people were there, and she's getting ready to take him to the airport. Once again, "You are going to be my brother's future wife." And this is why I said to him, I said, "Okay, Father Pimp." So when I said to myself, "Oh my gosh, I didn't just call this priest Father Pimp, did I?" That's where the Father P comes from. And everybody started laughing, including Father P. He started laughing as well. I guess, we're all from New York, so we don't take that personally. And we were cracking up laughing. And so I said to him, I said, "You know what? I'm going to call your bluff. If you're really that serious, when I get back home to California, you will hook me up with your brother and we'll take it from there." He was like, "Okay, you're going to be his future wife." And I was like, "Oh, Lord." Right. And so, okay, let's fast forward. I get back to California. All right. I text Father P. I'm back home. Yes, I would love to talk about my dad and things of that nature. All right. We get on the phone. The first thing Father P says to me is it okay if my brother contacts you and I give him your phone number and you send a picture? Can you send me a picture that I can attach with it?" And he was like going on and on and on. And then I said to him, "Father P, I really would like to hear what my dad has to say. Can we Let's talk about that first. And then we can get into being your brother's, future wife, is what I said to him. So he told me what he had to say about my dad, right? I was like, oh, thank you very much, and all that. Then he went right into his brother. So I was like, okay, fine. Send him these two pictures. You can give him a phone number. And I said, I don't have his phone number. So he's going to have to text me first to let me know it's him. So I don't just delete his butt from my text. He's like, okay, cool. So 24 hours later, I get a text from his brother. And I was like, oh. So what ends up happening? Yes, we did get on the phone and we started laughing. And he was like, oh, my brother, father pimp. So he goes, oh, that's so stellar, and everything else like that. And we started cracking up about that whole entire thing. All right. And then when we were talking, there were just various synchronicities. And not to mention, his brother, it was so good looking. Oh my word. I was like, whoa, he is fine. And so I was like, oh, he is definitely easy on the eyes. And I was like, okay, let's, talk, la, 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 la. So this is now in November. And so we actually ended up meeting each other. And it was on Christmas Eve. Of all timing, that is when we met. And I was thinking about my dad this entire time because I was just like, okay, what in this whole entire thing makes rational sense? That the priest that my dad trusted and confided, who I'm meeting for the first time at my dad's funeral, no less, is trying to matchmake me with his brother. And my dad trusted this priest like he didn't trust anybody. Like the only other person he trusted like that was actually his wife. So that says a lot. And it was like when I was like, my dad, this is his wife. And I'm losing count where his last wife, his current wife, which number she was, because I think my dad got married 4 times, I think. But and he loves and trusts her. He loves and trusts this man. So I can trust him wherever this situation is going because it is a message from my dad. There's no other way I could see this, right? It's a message from my dad because of all the cast of characters that are in this. And then to meet him on Christmas Eve, hello, Merry Christmas, and all this other stuff. And when I met him, he was really cool, tall, looking luscious, the whole entire 9 yards, easy to talk to, the whole entire thing. And it was great meeting him. But on my way back home, as I was reflecting, I said, his energy also felt familiar. There it is again, some energy that feels familiar. And I said to myself, okay, his energy feels familiar. And when I kept going with that, the energy he felt like was my very first real boyfriend. His energy felt like that. And this was the first boyfriend that turned into a toxic relationship. But at the time back then, let's go back. And this is when I was like 18, 19 years old. This is how far back we're going, right? Almost 50 years. At the time, I had a choice between that toxic relationship I had and a different dude. And what I ended up doing at the time in my teens, because of low self-confidence, I went with the toxic dude because, it was more exciting. And the other dude was, I felt he was boring kind of situation. And I realized this guy's energy felt familiar like that. And so it was like maybe, I don't know, 2 days later or something like that. I said to him, you know what? It was great meeting you. And I see us as good friends. I was feeling the friend and energy with us. Let's keep in contact because we have a very funny story of how we met. Because what was behind all that, and he was like, okay, great, da 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 da. Boom. Okay, we're friends now. Because what happened is I recognized this is an opportunity for me to make a different decision, for me to make a different choice, because I had the benefit of hindsight now. And so with this hindsight, I was not going to go down that same road. And so what happened is my dad leading me down this road, he opened up something to me, though, that before meeting this gentleman, I actually was closed off to. And so I realized that was also part of this story, because after I said thanks, but no thanks to this gentleman, right? 2 weeks later, that is when I met Loverboy, the man that I'm currently dating. And he is the one I said yes to because his energy felt very similar to the gentleman I said no to when I was a teenager almost 50 years ago because I felt he was boring. So what happened is, this is why I said spirit has a really funny sense of humor. All of this started from being matchmaked at my dad's funeral from the priest, Father P. And so, like I said, and that's going to be in a future podcast, a lover boy. All right. So I could share with you how we met, the synchronicities behind that, the mystic design embedded treatment that I did around that, to call Loverboy into my world and everything else like that. But it started from here in terms of, my dad being trying to matchmake on the other side, right? And the funny tale in which that is. So I want you to think about. Yes, you can laugh at this story, very much so. I want you to think about that because here is where, my dad was helping me to get clear. So I would, and not how I have the confidence now to say no to someone so that I could say yes to another. Because think of it this way. Your ego will want to play victim by saying, why does this keep happening to me? There you go again, another guy who feels exactly the same like so-and-so, blah, 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 right? This is because the ego is focused on the trigger, right? The trigger. But your higher self will see this as an opportunity to get a different result with the benefit of hindsight by saying this, oh, wow, this feels familiar, and then just like I brought up that memory of what this felt familiar like or who this felt familiar to. And then I go, oh, this is my chance to make a different decision so I can have a better and a different result. So let's see how this one will work out. And by taking on that mindset with the benefit of hindsight, that opened me up to receiving a Loverboy literally 2 weeks later. So this is what I invite you to contemplate on. All right. The first thing is this. What or who do you need to say no to so that you can say yes to yourself? Who do you need to say no to, which is many times the past, so that you can say yes to yourself? Saying yes to the present so that you can allow your future desire to come in. So that's the first thing I want you to contemplate on, okay? The next thing I would like for you to contemplate on is if you were given an opportunity for a relationship do-over with the benefit of hindsight, what different action or decision would you make? So just like I did in the story that I just shared with you, so if you ran into a similar situation, what would you do? Right? Because when you do this, you're healing yourself by not falling victim to the trigger. The ego wants to be right. The ego wants vindication. The ego wants to feel, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? The ego is the one that wants to blame. Okay? The ego does all of that. And that was a confirmation, if you heard that. But if you contemplate these two things that I just gave you, unbeknownst to you, what you're actually doing is you're actually developing your own plan of how to remain empowered and how to remain in your own power and not giving control to the situation or person that was part of the trigger, who many times is this invisible ghost that keeps resurrecting in your life, right? So listen to the funny story again. Have a good laugh. And then what I want you to do is I want you to contemplate on those two things. And then feel free to leave a comment on how it worked out for you, or what ahas or synchronicities did you see in this? All right, everybody. And with that, we are complete, and namaste.